A lot to learn here on a Tuesday in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center from running backs coach head coach Ryan Day. Andy Backstrom is here. The 41-year vet Tim May is here. Spencer Holbrook, that's me. You already know that. We're all here. Tony Alford is not here. I'm sure he's up in Schembechler Hall enjoying whatever they're doing up there right now.
$850,000.
Yeah, sure. That's a cushy salary. But now Ryan Day is taking over the running backs room. Tim, what'd you learn?
I learned it when I broached the idea that when you walked into that room, was it like a substitute teacher? And he goes, oh no, whatever. He prepared himself for the meeting. Number one, we all anticipated him taking that room, right? Because he's been a rover so far this spring. Like he reiterated this, and it's really funny because I know he wasn't doing this intentionally, but it was like driving home a point. Man, what are you doing? I'm talking about the guy who left. This is the best running back room in the country.
He said that a couple times.
He did, and he made a point of that, and it looks like these guys are sticking around, so to speak. Nobody jumped ship immediately, not that you can right now, but it's very interesting that he knows that is one of the key components of this football team. What makes this team special is Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins, and Dallin Hayden, with James Peoples coming on and others. But the bottom line is those top three, but especially those top two, are proven commodities, and they're going to be a focal point of this offense, even more so with Chip Kelly coming in as the offensive coordinator. They want to rejuvenate that running game from a consistency standpoint, and Ryan Day took it upon himself to lead the room, lead the lessons before they hit the field for a very brief 90-minute practice today.
Yeah, Andy, it's interesting because Ryan Day talked about people have choices to make, and that's a choice that he made. He obviously talking about Tony Alford. He talked about how, again, it's the best running back room in the country. He was asked how the players received it that Tony Alford left for Michigan, and I think there was a little flicker of fire in Ryan Day's eye there. Obviously not happy about how this all went down, but also I thought Ryan Day handled it about as well as you can handle it when your running back coach leaves for your biggest rival.
He didn't want to talk about the rivalry that much. It's in the moment. This is March. That game's played in November. But yeah, so you could tell. I mean, no one would want that kind of destination if you have a coach that's leaving. He did talk about the coaching search.
Hey, wait a minute, but he hired a couple guys from Michigan.
Not in the middle of spring practice.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. I mean, there's give and take in this kind of rivalry.
For sure, it's not unprecedented. He did talk about the coaching search for the running backs position. He said that it's going to be similar to the offensive coordinator position, where it's not going to be rushed. It's a thorough process. It's going to be broken down to an A list, a B list, and even maybe a C list of candidates. He's going to go through that, and if you can get anyone on the A list, it's a win. So we talked about kind of fleshing out the offensive coordinator timeline. Both Bill O'Brien and Chip Kelly were in the A-list category. And, Bill O'Brien was the first hire. Timing just didn't work for Chip Kelly in that case. Then when Bill O'Brien left for Boston College, Chip Kelly was in a different place, and it worked out. So he kind of compared those two coaching searches and said that the running backs position is going to be following a similar mold, where he's going to really take his time with it. He said there's no rush, which is interesting because I think when we all reacted to this news, we're like, okay, they got to find someone fast. It's spring ball. They're 2 practices in. This happened during spring break. He didn't talk about that. He said, they're not going to rush this. He seems to be fine handling the running backs on his own for now, and they're going to be patient with finding the right candidate.
Yeah, and you got to figure that candidate is probably involved with spring football somewhere else, perhaps prominently, as we've talked about. But the other thing, real quick, I offered that opinion way back when he hired Chip Kelly was to replace Bill O'Brien. Was Chip Kelly seemed to have his mind set on moving to the NFL in some role, in December, when I'm sure this was first broached by Ryan, and I think that kind of got even more spelled out today, because I think Chip Kelly probably was his first pick all along from the standpoint of who would I hire first. It would be this guy that I've known all my life, who I played football for, who I've coached with and stuff. So it was interesting someone to ask that and him put that in context.
Yeah, a lot of programs are in the middle of spring practice. A couple programs even on spring break this week.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, the timing couldn't be more interesting for Ohio State as the Buckeyes look for a new running backs coach. The priorities do not change when it comes to finding a new coach. He expects the best staff in the country. So it's the best running back room in the country. It's also needs to be the best running back coach in the country. So that's Ryan Day's prerogative, is to find the best running back coach in the country. I don't expect this to go all the way through to the end of spring. I think that this is a 1 to 2 week process that we're looking at right now. And I would even err closer to the 1.5 weeks than I would the 2 weeks. I think that, yes, there's not a rush, but not a rush means we're not just going to get on the phone, interview guys, and then have a guy in 2 days. I think we're going to interview guys and then have a decision made here in the next week or two and have some buttons, buttoned up, I guess, if you will, to get this thing done and get somebody in here to coach those running backs. But in the meantime, Ryan Day seems to be enjoying the hell out of this, man. Like, he seems to be having fun. Mm-hmm. Like, he's coaching ball again. And he's got an offensive coordinator that has to worry about the play sheet. He's got quarterbacks that are worried about helmet comms. But all the while, Ryan Day is A, working with special teams, B, working with running backs, C, getting his hands dirty with the defense. Like, he seems to be having so much fun so far this spring. And I sense that from him as he's up at the podium.
Remember that question I asked him the first day, like 2 weeks ago? I said, did you ever stand out there in the middle of this group of this talent and look around and everything that you've amassed, including Chip Kelly, but now as your offensive coordinator, and just sort of go, damn,
Yeah.
I mean, he's leaving. He's not even couching it. He knows this is a hell of a roster. Mm-hmm. I mean, he talked about it today even some more. He knows the primary focal point this spring. I mean, everything's a focal point right in the spring. But find that offensive line, especially that right side of the offensive line, get that figured out and figure out, if you can, who your starting quarterback is for sure through the spring. Those are still the main jobs, but because he knows if those two components come together, they got something going here. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you're, like he said, doesn't guarantee anything, doesn't mean anything, except that you've got the pieces in place to really get to where you want to go.
Andy, what else did you learn? Obviously a lot of running back talk. But I thought you had a great question about Kenyatta Jackson. We kind of double teamed it a little bit as far as defensive tackle question, defensive end question, a little bit of the focus there. We're going to talk to Brian Hartline and Tim Walton on Thursday. There's a little bit of focus there. But, Ryan Day, so much to learn. I think this was the most informative press conference we've had since the Cotton Bowl. What'd you learn from him today? Because it seemed like there's a lot to take away.
Well, it seems like they figured out the special teams operation, and Rob Keyes is a quality control coach here for, I think this is his second or third year now with the program. He's kind of behind the scenes heading up that operation. They're using 4 position coaches. They're having James Laurinaitis and Matt Guerreri dealing with punt and kick coverage, and they're having Brian Hartline and Keenan Bailey dealing with punt and kick return. And so, that was actually an idea that was inspired by Jim Tressel. Ryan Day said he called a bunch of coaches, tried to figure out, what can I do with this if I'm not going to have a special teams coordinator? And he said the call with Jim Tressel really struck with him. And he said that, this is something that Jim Tressel did, and it's something that really got buy-in from the players because you're working with your position coaches. And there's an incentive in that, right? Because you feel motivated to impress your position coach because maybe you'll get to play at your actual position rather than on special teams. And so that seems to be working out quite well. And that stuck out to me because we've been wondering, how is that going to pan out? And we've heard of something along the lines of that, but now we actually have the names to match with which positions they're actually, heading up in spring ball.
Yeah, Urban Meyer did that for the most part, right? I mean, the main thing is your first avenue to getting playing time is showing that you will sacrifice, you will do what it takes on special teams and stuff. And we proffered that was going to be probably what happened with this team months ago, because the special teams coordinator thing didn't really pan out like they wanted. And plus you got one guy to blame, I thought that was unfair. Some of the things that happened on special teams, a guy misses a field goal, there's a special teams coach. Somebody doesn't line up right, they don't get a fake punt off right on down the line. It's like that's a lot of involvement for one guy to be responsible for and be blamed for and stuff. And like he said, I think and Coach Tressel did that, man. I remember it. That's why I said that's where I thought Ryan Day was going to go with this, is because you have other guys involved who will also offer ideas, etc., and keep guys on their P's and Q's. Hey, this isn't fun and games. It's special teams wins and loses football games. So it's interesting. But, but he left it pretty much said that he's kind of overseeing everybody.
The operation.
And he wants to be on the meetings of everybody. So he's coaching running backs and all the special teams. Ryan Day, man, for a guy stepping back, sure is stepping in.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that he mentioned, and I think there's a loophole to be had there.
You're supposed to laugh a little bit at that line.
Ha! I love it. there's a little loophole I think Ohio State's found where quality control guys can coach coaches, but they can't coach players.
Yeah.
So Rob Keyes, being an 11-year head coach, if you know the 419, you know that Rob Keyes was an 11-year head coach at the University of Findlay, did a great job there, went to multiple NCAA Division II playoff appearances.
I just like how you worked that 419 in there again 2 days in a row.
Well, I don't think people from Southeast Ohio and other places around Ohio definitely know who Rob Keyes is, but if you're from the Findlay area, you know Rob Keyes because he was the head coach at the Division II program that a lot of high school kids go play at. And
Oilers,
so
baby.
Rob has great connections in Ohio. He knows how to deal with coaches. So what's he doing now? He's helping Matt Guerrieri and James Laurinaitis and Brian Hartline and Keenan Bailey put together a game plan for special teams, and then they come out here and execute it, but he's behind the scenes doing it all. And that's not for me to, blow smoke up, what for Rob Keyes, but like that's an important position here, especially when you don't have a special teams coordinator, and he stepped into that role and I think kind of ran with it. I like the way that they're setting up this special teams, and as we move forward here and shift gears, the other thing that struck me that Ryan Day was talking about was the amount of guys, in the 3 deep or the 2 deep that just have to keep stepping up.
Oh yeah.
Whether that's Brandon Ennis, whether that's, he talked about Jaden Ballard finally needing, not wanting him to do that, but he needs to take that step. He talked about Jason Moore and Caden McDonald when I asked him about defensive tackles. Like, they know the talent, like you said, Tim. They know how many guys can be NFL players here, but it's not the top level talent that wins you a national title.
Right.
It is the guys underneath them when, God forbid, but when Carnell Tate rolls an ankle against, Northwestern, who's going to step into that role and be the next receiver? Jaden Ballard has to take that step. When, Tyleik Williams gets ejected for a terrible targeting call that we know happens in college football, who comes in and plays defensive tackle against Penn State? Like, those are the things that you have to have, and the spring is so vital for those. And I thought it was important that Ryan Day talked about building that depth into the second week of spring this week.
And on the offensive line, like we talked about,
yeah.
I mean, they're like I think you asked the question, but
but he talked about Austin Sarabelt a lot today.
Yeah. But the point is, there are guys there. It's that moment, For Tegra Shabola, this is no secret. Tegra even knows. He even pointed it out, in middle of the winter. This is the moment, man. Mm-hmm. It's time to step up, get with the program, so to speak. But not that he hadn't been with the program, but you know what I'm talking about. Assert yourself. Prove that you belong out there blocking Division 1A elite defensive ends and tackles like you get to go against every day in practice. And because if you don't, somebody's going to go by you. Mm-hmm. And that's why I would like to watch practice every day, the whole practice like we used to get to do long ago. Because you can see guys who have taken the bet and guys who haven't. And most of this team, though, that's what gets you about this roster. This team is made up, for the most part, of alphas. Mm-hmm. I mean, they want to play, and they want to show why they should get to play. And you don't ever, like Ryan pointed out, you don't ever know about offensive linemen until you put on the full pads and you're going full go. Is this guy nasty? Is he getting after that other dude? And very key for a lot of these young offensive linemen the next 12 practices.
Yeah, Andy, the last time that they got to watch full practice in here, Tim was watching Chick Harley wrap up an undefeated season for Ohio State. But keeping it with that offensive line, Ryan Day talked today about Josh Fryer potentially moving to guard and experience a little bit of experiment there if they have to. He talked about where Luke Montgomery fits in if that happens. He talked about Austin Sarabelt playing left guard but can play on the right side if they need him to. Like, they're willing to try some things right now, and that's okay because they're just putting pads on. They're just getting comfortable. They're getting the system down. And so there's going to be some experiment. And then in the center spot, which I know you've had your eye on for this entire offseason already, he talked about Seth McLaughlin and the snapping issues and Carson Hinsman and his progress. So there's a lot to learn still on that offensive line.
Yeah, it sounds like Seth is doing just fine with the snaps and the cadence, everything at Ohio State so far, and that seems to be something he's trying to put in his past, right? And then Carson Hinsman also is doing well with snaps, Ryan Day said today, and so that's a competition. That's two players going at it. Carson Hinsman started 12 games last year at center when no one thought he would play in his second year after not playing a single snap as a true freshman. So Luke Whippler leaving kind of accelerated that timeline. So that's a competition. As you mentioned, the right side is a huge question of who's going to play at guard and tackle. The left side seems to be pretty set. Mm-hmm. That could be a very talented NFL caliber left side of the line if Josh Simmons kind of just come into his own. The talent is there. if he can connect it with the experience and take that next step. Donovan Jackson is an All-American type player. He didn't always play at that level last year. If he can get to maximizing his skill set, you have to be really excited about that left side of the line.
I think they've got it, whether they admit it or not. They got to feel a lot better about the offensive line at this moment compared to this moment a year ago.
I think they would definitely admit that.
I mean, that's really, well, Josh Simmons wasn't even here yet, right? I mean,
yeah.
So, I mean, if you're an Ohio State fan out there and you were listening to this and wondering what's going on, that's got to buoy you big time.
Yeah.
Because I thought, and we talked about it ad nauseum, but the Cotton Bowl was just a disaster for the offensive line. In other words, the big games when they really needed that push on, Notre Dame, they finally got it done on that last drive. Michigan looked like they were getting it done on their last drive till the bugaboo and then the bad throw because of it, and Cal McCord gets intercepted. Next thing you know, he's in Syracuse. But my point is, this just looks like even though there are going to be maybe 2 new starters possibly on the line, it looks like a much more veteran group. And it's got to make you feel good because of the weapons that you've got around them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Ryan Day, a lot to learn from him today, the running backs coach at Ohio State. He took the podium as if he was the head coach. It was kind of crazy to watch, guys.
Yeah, we need to talk quarterbacks, though, if we get out of here, though.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you interrupted me, Andy. Who's going to play quarterback for Ohio State?
What did you learn today you didn't already know?
Well, he talked about they're both throwing at pro day. We're not getting to see practice today, but we're going to see them throw at pro day, which is an interesting thing.
See, that's where the transition was going to come, so I could wrap it up with pro day. But now we get to talk quarterbacks. I'm glad you did this, Andy. Quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Will Howard still taking a lot of 1 reps, it seems like, because he's got helmet comms. Devin Brown still taking 1 reps because Ryan Day said he's got some helmet comms. Lincoln Keenholz has some helmet comms. And so those things are little cues that we can pick up on now that they're allowed in this building. Mm-hmm. Who has those helmets? Who's got the radios? And that means, who's learning that offense when they hear it in the cadence and those things like that. I think that's a little bit of a peek behind the curtain that we can start to see now that those things are legal.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Well, wait a minute. You didn't expect the 2 freshmen.
Well,
no,
I think it's interesting they only get 3.
Okay. They only get 3 is super interesting.
So far,
yeah. They only get,
you know what I'm saying?
So they only get, for people who don't know, now they can use helmet comms technology to relay the plays in, and that's a big change, especially with last season with everything with the sign stealing and that whole scandal. It looks like college football is trying to move in the direction of the NFL, which will make things a little bit more smooth sailing with signs not having to be such a big thing in the game. And so these quarterbacks are working with that for the first time, and I thought it was really funny because he was talking about Lincoln Keenholz was getting super confused, and it wasn't Lincoln Keenholz's fault. They realized on the first day of practice using them, you can't call plays in on 2 different headsets at the same time. So the quarterbacks were hearing 2 different voices.
Well, they were running 2 different, 2 different groups.
Yeah, and so Lincoln Keenholz was hearing the voice of Chip Kelly, but also hearing the voice of Ryan Day at the same time. And so they're still working out the kinks with that stuff, but super interesting. And it seems like with reps right now, they're just rolling guys like they were in the first week. But he said the next 2 practices are going to be longer and harder, and they're going to have to divvy up reps, I guess, in a more diplomatic way with these quarterbacks, heading towards the meat of spring.
Yeah, it's very interesting right now, and it's going to be good for all of us, the media, the coaches, to watch both Will Howard and Devin Brown not only throw in front of them, but tomorrow throw in front of quite a few NFL scouts and NFL personnel and NFL GMs and head coaches who are going to be in this building to watch Marvin Harrison Jr. and the lot of Buckeyes who are going to be working out here for Ohio State Pro Day. Lettermen Row will be here for Ohio State Pro Day tomorrow on Wednesday afternoon. We'll have full coverage of it at lettermenrow.com. Go to lettermenrow.com right now. Get your first month for $1. That's right, full coverage of all the rest of spring practice for $1. I think that's a great deal. Tim May, the 41-year vet, his content resides there. Andy Backstrom, his does as well, and myself, Spencer Holbrook, Matt Parker, and Alex Gleitman over on the recruiting side. They've got you covered for the rest of spring. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow about Pro Day because it's going to be a busy, busy day here in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. But until then, head to lettermenrow.com. Get the rest of the coverage for $1 for your first month.